Winnie Madikizela-Mandela.
Winnie Madikizela-Mandela is a South African activist and politician who has held several government positions and headed the African National Congress Women's League. She is a member of the ANC's National Executive Committee. She was married to Nelson Mandela for 38 years, including 27 years during which he was imprisoned. Although they were still married at the time of his becoming President of South Africa in May 1994, the couple had separated 2 years earlier. Their divorce was finalized on March 19, 1996, though Winnie Mandela continued to be a presence in Mandela's life in later years despite his remarriage in 1998. Winnie could be seen almost daily visiting her former husband Nelson Mandela at the Mediclinic Heart Hospital in Pretoria where he was receiving treatment. Of all the major figures who came to global prominence during the South African liberation struggle, Ms. Madikizela-Mandela was the most glamorous and the most at home in the world of celebrity culture, which is what made her fall from grace all the more startling. And for many of the years just before Mr. Mandela's release from 27 years in prison, she was his public face, bringing word of his thoughts and his state of mind. She was offered academic honors abroad. A controversial activist, she is popular among her supporters, who refer to her as the mother of the nation, yet reviled by others after the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission found Ms. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela politically and morally accountable for the gross violations of human rights, concluding that she had personally been responsible for the murder, torture, abduction and assault of numerous men, women and children, as well as indirectly responsible for an even larger number of such crimes. In March 2009, the Independent Electoral Commission ruled that Madikizela-Mandela, selected as an ANC candidate, could run in the April 2009 general election, despite her suspended jail sentence for fraud. But Winnie Mandela was the target not only of the government but of politics and the press, speaking her mind and speaking strongly. Detractors and enemies tried to label her a firebrand and a political liability.
Early life.
Her Xhosa name is Nomzamo, she who tries. She was born in the village of Mbongweni, Bizana, Pondoland, in what is now South Africa's Eastern Cape province. She held a number of jobs in various parts of what was then the Bantustan of Transkei, including with the Transkei government, living at various times in Bizana, Shawbury and Johannesburg. Despite restrictions on education of blacks during apartheid, she earned a degree in social work from the Jan Hofmeyr School in Johannesburg, and several years later earned a bachelor's degree in international relations from the University of Witwatersrand.
Marriage, children.
She met lawyer and anti-apartheid activist Nelson Mandela in 1957. She was 22 and standing at a bus stop in Soweto when Mandela first saw her and charmed her, securing a lunch date the following week. They married in 1958 and had 2 daughters, Zinani, born 1959, and Zenzi, born 1960. Nelson Mandela was arrested in 1963 and released in 1990. The couple separated in 1992 and finalized the divorce in 1996 with an unspecified out-of-court settlement. Her attempt to obtain a settlement up to $5 million, half of what she claimed her ex-husband was worth, was dismissed when she failed to appear in court for a settlement hearing.
Apartheid.
Winnie Mandela carved her own name in struggle law. She was regularly detained by the apartheid government. She was tortured, subjected to house arrest, kept under surveillance, held in solitary confinement for a year and banished to a remote town. She emerged as a leading opponent of the white minority rule government during the later years of her husband's imprisonment, August 1963, February 1990. For many of those years, she was exiled to the town of Brandfort in the Orange Free State and confined to the area, except for the times she was allowed to visit her husband at the prison on Robben Island. Beginning in 1969, she spent 18 months in solitary confinement at Pretoria's Central Prison. It was at this time that Winnie Mandela became well known in the West. She organized local clinics, campaigned actively for equal rights and was promoted by the ANC as a symbol of his struggle against apartheid. In a leaked letter to Jacob Zuma in October 2008, just-resigned President of South Africa Thabo Mbeki alluded to the role the ANC had created for her in its anti-apartheid activism. In 1985, Mandela won the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award along with fellow activists Alan Boesak and Bears Nord for their human rights work in South Africa. The award is given annually by the Robert F. Kennedy Center for Justice and Human Rights to an individual or group whose courageous activism is at the heart of the human rights movement and in the spirit of Robert F. Kennedy's vision and legacy.
Criminal convictions and findings of criminal behavior.
Her reputation was damaged by such rhetoric as that displayed in a speech she gave in Munsieville on April 13, 1986, where she endorsed the practice of necklacing, burning people alive using tires and petrol, by saying, "If our boxes of matches and our necklaces we shall liberate this country." Further tarnishing her reputation were accusations by her bodyguard, Jerry Masivuzi Richardson, that she had ordered kidnapping and murder. On December 29, 1988, Richardson, who was coach of the Mandela United Football Club, MUFC, which acted as Mrs. Mandela's personal security detail, abducted 14-year-old James Saipe, also known as Stompie Moeketsi, and 3 other youths from the home of a Methodist minister, Reverend Paul Veron, claiming she had the youths taken to her home because she suspected the Reverend was sexually abusing them. The 4 were beaten to get them to admit to having had sex with the minister. Saipe was accused of being an informer, and his body later found in a field with stab wounds to the throat on January 6, 1989. In 1991, she was acquitted of all but the kidnapping. Her 6-year jail sentence was reduced to a fine on appeal. The final report of the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission, issued in 1998, found Ms. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela politically and morally accountable for the gross violations of human rights committed by the MUFC, and that she was responsible, by omission, for the commission of gross violations of human rights. In 1992, she was accused of ordering the murder of Dr. Abu Bakr Asvat, a family friend who had examined Saipe at Mandela's house, after Saipe had been abducted but before he had been killed. Mandela's role was later probed as part of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings, in 1997. She was said to have paid the equivalent of $8,000 and supplied the firearm used in the killing, which took place on January 27, 1989. The hearings were later adjourned amid claims that witnesses were being intimidated on Winnie Mandela's orders.
Transition to democracy.
During South Africa's transition to democracy, she adopted a far less conciliatory and compromising attitude than her husband toward the white community. Despite being on her husband's arm when he was released in 1990, the first time the two had been seen in public for nearly 30 years, the Mandela's 38-year marriage ended when they separated in April 1992 after it was revealed she had been unfaithful to her husband during his imprisonment. The couple divorced in March 1996. She then adopted the surname Madikizela-Mandela. Appointed Deputy Minister of Arts, Culture, Science and Technology in the first post-apartheid government, May 1994, she was dismissed 11 months later following allegations of corruption. She remained extremely popular among many ANC supporters, however. In December 1993 and April 1997, she was elected president of the ANC Women's League, although she withdrew her candidacy for ANC deputy president at the movement's Mafeking conference in December 1997. Earlier in 1997, she appeared before the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Archbishop Desmond Tutu as chairman of the commission recognized her importance in the anti-apartheid struggle, but exhorted her to apologize and to admit her mistakes. In a guarded response, she admitted things went horribly wrong.
Legal problems.
On April 24, 2003, Winnie Mandela was found guilty on 43 counts of fraud and 25 of theft, and her broker, Addie Molman, was convicted on 58 counts of fraud and 25 of theft. Both had pleaded not guilty to the charges, which related to money taken from loan applicants' accounts for a funeral fund, but from which the applicants did not benefit. Madikizela-Mandela was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Shortly after the conviction, she resigned from all leadership positions in the ANC, including her parliamentary seat and the presidency of the ANC Women's League. In July 2004, an appeal judge of the Pretoria High Court ruled that the crimes were not committed for personal gain. The judge overturned the conviction for theft, but upheld the one for fraud, handing her a 3 years and 6 months suspended sentence. In June 2007, the Canadian High Commission in South Africa declined to grant Winnie Mandela a visa to travel to Toronto, Canada, where she was scheduled to attend a gala fundraising concert organised by arts organisation Musique Noire, which included the world premiere of The Passion of Winnie, an opera based on her life.
Return to politics.
When the ANC announced the election of its National Executive Committee on December 21, 2007, Mandela placed first with 2845 votes.
Apology to riot victims.
Madikizela criticized the anti-immigrant violence in May-June 2008 that began in Johannesburg and spread throughout the country, and blamed the government's lack of suitable housing provisions for the sentiments behind the riots. She apologized to the victims of the riots and visited the Alexandra township. She offered her home as shelter for an immigrant family from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. She warned that the perpetrators of the violence could strike at the Gauteng train system.
2009 general election.
Madikizela-Mandela secured 5th place on the ANC's electoral list for the 2009 general election, behind party president and current president of South Africa Jacob Zuma, former president of South Africa Kgalema Motlanthe, deputy president of South Africa Balkan Beat, and finance minister Trevor Manuel. An article in The Observer suggested her position near the top of the list indicated that the party's leadership saw her as a valuable asset in the election with regard to solidifying support among the party's grassroots and the poor.
2010 interview with Nadira Naipal.
In 2010, Madikizela-Mandela was interviewed by Nadira Naipal. In the interview, she attacked her ex-husband, claiming that he had let blacks down, that he was only wheeled out to collect money, and that he is nothing more than a foundation. She further attacked his decision to accept the Nobel Peace Prize with F.W. de Klerk. Among other things, she reportedly claimed Mandela was no longer accessible to her daughters. She referred to Archbishop Tutu, in his capacity as the head of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, as a cretin. The interview attracted media attention, and the ANC announced that it would ask her to explain her comments regarding Nelson Mandela. On March 14, 2010, a statement was issued on behalf of Winnie Mandela claiming that the interview was a fabrication.
In media.
Mandela was first portrayed by Alf Woodard in the TV movie Mandela. Tina Lifford portrayed her in the 1997 TV drama Mandela and de Klerk. Sophie Okonedo portrayed her in the BBC drama Mrs. Mandela, first broadcast on BBC 4 on January 25, 2010. Jennifer Hudson played her in Winnie Mandela, directed by Daryl Root, released in Canada by D Films on September 16, 2011. Root, Andre P. Terse, and Paul L. Johnson based the film script on Anne-Marie Dupree's Besdrob's biography, Winnie Mandela, A Life. The Creative Workers' Union of South Africa opposed the choice of Hudson in the title role, saying the use of foreign actors to tell the country's stories undermined efforts to develop the national film industry. Mandela was again portrayed in the 2013 film Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom by actress Naomi Harris. British actor Idris Elba played Nelson Mandela. On viewing the film, Madikizela-Mandela told Harris it was the first time she felt her story had been captured on film. Guguvu Okamsleku, writing in The Guardian, stated that the film had returned Winnie Mandela to her rightful place, recognizing her role in the struggle that, for South African women, was more fundamental than her husband's.